Hi there, my name is April Sawtelle and welcome to my channel. Today what I'm going to be doing is just showing you a really quick baby quilt. I'm going to show you how to make it. It's going to be this quilt that's right here behind me. I don't have this sewn yet. I'm going to do that as we go. What you're going to need for today's project is an iron. You're going to need a rotary cutter, some scissors, a ruler, pins, and some fabric. What I've got here is I've got some batting. I'm going to use this polyester batting. I want this baby quilt really fluffy. So I'm going to use a piece of polyester batting for that. I'm going to use 4 colors of fabric here. So what I've got here is I've got one that I'm going to cut out 6 10-inch squares. These are all going to be 10-inch squares. You can cut yardage, or you could actually just use a layer cake if you want to do that. So I'm going to cut 6 10-inch squares out of this one. And I'm going to cut 2 out of the other 3, 2 10-inch squares each, as you can see there. Okay, I'm going to have a piece of backing here. This is going to be my backing. And I'm going to have trim. I've got a 3-inch piece of trim that I'm going to put all the way around. And I've got that cut out as well. This is just going to be a super easy patchwork quilt. Very, very basic sewing. This will give you a lot of practice. Then we can go on to the next one. The next quilt I want to do is just going to be an easy 4-patch quilt. But for today, this is just a very beginner-friendly patchwork quilt. Okay, let's get started. So I've got mine laid out here, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these 3 bottom pieces. And I'm going to sew them right in that order. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take right sides together, and I'm going to sew. I like to sew from right to left. So I'm going to sew right on top of here. Now, if you want to, you could stick a couple of pins in here. Just to keep you nice and straight. What I'm going to do is I've got right sides together. I'm going to sew these 2 together, and then I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to put this one on this side, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pin that. That way when I go over to the sewing machine, I'll be already ready for this whole row. So it's going to look like this after I sew it. I'm going to do that to all of the rows. I'm over here on my Janome 6700 piece sewing machine. I've got white Orifel thread in, and I've got it in the top and in the bottom. I've got this blue painter's tape, which I'm going to follow all the way down. That's at my 1/4 inch. And I'm going to line my presser foot right on the edge of my fabric. I've got right sides together. And I'm using a directional fabric, so I want to be sure that this is facing me at all times. That way I know for sure that will stay in the direction. This is going to be the bottom row of my patchwork quilt. So I'll show you what I do. I'm going to stick a label on it. I don't really need to for this little baby quilt, but in case you're making something bigger and you're just learning, this will just show you how to do that. So I've got my right sides together. I'm going to sew my 1/4 inch. I am going to go ahead and give this a little back stitch just because I don't want that to come apart when I put it together. And for some reason, when I make patchwork quilts, that does happen to me quite a bit. So a little back stitch won't hurt anything. I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch. I'm going to pull the pins out as I go. I have already sewn this. I'm just going over it. And when I come to the bottom, I'm just going over it because I went too far before I showed you what I was doing. I'm going to back stitch again, and I'll cut my thread right there. All I'm going to do is open this up, and I'm going to turn this around. I'm going to do the same thing. Right sides together, okay, and I'm going to line it up, and I'm going to give it that back stitch. Start, back stitch, and follow my painter's tape all the way down. Cut my thread, and I'll open this up right here, and there's my first piece that's done. Now, if I was doing a whole bunch of rows in this little quilt, I'm only going to do 4 rows of 3, so it's not going to be out of control because there's such big blocks. But if you were going to use small blocks, you're going to have a lot of blocks. It's going to be very confusing. So you could just take a scrap piece of paper here, rip off a little piece. Today I'm going to start at the bottom, so this is going to be row 1. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pin that right on the left hand corner of my work. That way, when I go to line these up, I know the order in which they're going to go. So here's my number 1 on there. I've got that pinned on. I know that that's going to be, today I'm going to put that at the bottom row, and I'm going to call that number 1. I'm going to work my way up that way. So there's my number 1, and I'm going to just continue to make piles. I'm going to go to my board, take my piles off, and then I'm going to continue to sew them until I'm done, and then I'm going to go iron them. I'm just going to grab the second row now, and I'm going to put these together. And I'm going to go back to my sewing machine, and I'm going to put the pins in. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to give it a little back stitch right there. I'm going to follow that down, pulling my pin out as I go. I'm going to bring that all the way down. And a little back stitch here. Okay. Now I'm going to add the last piece on. Again, making sure it's facing me. I'm showing you pinning for demonstration purposes. I might not pin on all of these. You never know. I do like to pin. I just never know when I'm going to do it. So if you watch my tutorials and you see, sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Depends if I can hold it. If I can hold it for a long stretch, you know, like a long ways, I won't pin a lot of the times. Okay. And I'm going to give it a back stitch. I'm thinking a lot of people don't give it that back stitch, and I'm sure their quilts come out just beautiful. Mine just always come apart right there for some reason. And I'm going to give it a back stitch. All right. I'm going to put a little label here. Just going to cut a little, rip a little piece of scrap paper. And I'll write the number 2 on it. And when I'm sewing, I say left to right. Here I go again. I just guess I just don't have any rules how I go, because I keep finding myself, I start on the left or I start on the right. Do whatever works for you. Okay, now I've got my number 2. That is here on the left-hand side. I want to keep in order, so that I just pinned into the left-hand side of row 2. So when I go over to the board, I will be able to put it back in place, just like I said before. So I'm going to lay this one on top of my row 1. There's my row 1. And here's my row 2. All right. I'm going to move on to row 3. So row 1, I'm just going to press the seams to the left. That will be my starting point. I want to alternate which way I put the seams as I go. using steam, and I'm going to give that a little press on the top, just to flatten out this seam. All right. Now row 2, I'm going to press right to the right. Row 3 will be to the left. And just alternate as you go, and then it will just, each row will be facing the opposite, so the seams will just nest right together. All right, now we can start putting this together. Row 1 and row 2, I'm just going to go right on top of each other. I'm going to lay that right up on top of it. I'm going to nest these seams. I've got one going this way, one going that way. And then you're going to feel it nest. And then you can just stick a pin in there. Now this is where I really recommend that you pin, because if not, it's easy to get those separated from each other. Once they nest, pop a pin. You can feel it right in your fingers. All of those pieces of fabric just falling right in together. Okay. And then we're going to take this over to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew 1/4 of an inch all the way down again. Now I'm going to just line row 3 and 4 up first. Okay, I'm going to put right sides together. Nest those seams. And you can see here, each fabric's going in the opposite direction. And put your pin right in there, matching up how it rests inside of each other. It's like a groove. All right, now I'm going to take these over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew this one and this one. Now I want to be sure that I take out the pin and the number. I'm going to do the same thing I was doing before. I'm going to start, I'm going to get a little back stitch, and then I'm going to sew my 1/4 of an inch all the way down. The only place I pinned on this part was in my seam where I nested the seam. It's a nice long stretch. I feel confident I'm going to be all set. And when I get to that seam, I'm going to pull my pin out, and I'm going to sew right over that. If you want to, you can take a peek right there and just make sure that you're lined up. And this is where you can just look and see if your patchwork points are meeting. My 4 patchwork points are all meeting. So I'm going to continue. You really don't have to look all the time, but until you get the groove of it, you might want to. Because it's easier to fix right then if you decide you want to. I don't like to seam rip, so I don't fix a lot of the things I should probably fix. So here's my pin, and I'm just going to go right over that. And just for demonstration, let's look. And they did. You can see right here. And I'll continue on with another back stitch right there. I'm going to sew the other one together, and then I'm going to go over and iron this. Now on this one, what we can do now is we can set these seams. And then we can open this up and press this out. Okay, now I'm going to do the same to the other one. And this is a good time to just double check to make sure you're still having your fabric the way that you had intended it to go, in the same lineup. Set my seam again. I'm going to open it up, and I'm just going to press that out. Opening those seams up so it'll lay nice and flat. Okay, so now all of our little birds are facing me, so I know that that's the right order. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to put these two together. I'm going to do the same thing I just did. Right sides together, and we're just attaching them. You can stick a pin, you're going to nest those seams, and put your pin right in. Over here, same thing, nest. They look good. They're going opposite directions. Put your pin in. Take it over to the sewing machine and sew that last seam, 1/4 of an inch. Okay, do the same thing. Back stitch and 1/4 of an inch all the way down. Pull your pin out, going over that seam. You might need to maneuver your quilt around a little bit, your quilt top, because it's getting a little bit big. And continue sewing. So right there, I got a little bit off track as I was going. I was going a little too fast. So I'm going to come back and fix that. I'm just going to line everything back up. Follow my presser foot. Okay, pull your pin out. And back stitch. Okay, break my thread. I'm going to go back over to the iron and give it one more press. Okay, all I'm going to do now is open this up. Actually, I'm going to set that last seam. Set the seam. And then open it up and give it one more press. You might need to pull that just a little bit just to open it up as you go. Not a big tug. You don't want to stretch your fabric. You just, you're just opening it. Everything is about laying flat, so. All right. So there is the little baby quilt top. Now, what I'm going to do, and there it is. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add border to it. So, I've got my 3-inch border. I'll take a piece of that. And I'm going to start on the long sides. And I'm going to just attach this. You're going to put right sides together, right side to right side. And you can pin it if you'd like. I'm going to do both the long sides, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to do the tops. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to do the top and the bottom. I'm just going to attach the other side. I'm still just on the long side. And I'm just going to put a couple of pins in. I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine and I'm just going to give it a long stitch down both sides. Pull my pin out, line this up. I'm going to give it a back stitch. I've done that this whole quilt. I'm going to continue. Most of the time in quilting you don't need to because you're going to quilt it, but for today, I just felt like I needed to on this, the kind of quilt I'm making. All right, there's one. I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to do the other side. Now I've got both of those pieces of trim on there. I'm just going to give that a quick press. So all I'm going to do here is take like this and just follow that seam. Just a quick press. You're just setting the seam there. Then you can open it up and push the seam out. And do the same to the other side. And now we're going to do the same to the two ends. I'm going to add the trim on both ends. I had overhang here from that first piece of trim I put, so I'll just cut that right off and put that in my scrap pile. All right, and now we're going to do the same thing. This is what I mean. If you don't put a back stitch, what happens is sometimes you can lose a stitch there. Like it'll just start to come apart. So that's why I like to do a back stitch. So I'm going to fix that right now. I'm just going to run it back down and put a back stitch. If I don't do it, my fabric's not going to line up right. Or it's going to just be too loose and come apart. So there, it's all fixed. Now I'm going to lay right sides together. I'm not going to use pins to put this piece of trim on. And I'm going to give it a back stitch right there. This whole demonstration, I'm just going to use the back stitch. And this is what I mean. These ends here are where they come apart for me every time I do a patchwork quilt. So I'm going to eliminate that part. I'm just going to trim that right down right there and put that in my scrap bin. And I'm going to do the same to the other side. There's the other side. Then I will cut that piece off. I didn't cut that off yet. Off. Okay. And I'm going to line this up. Give it a back stitch. And off I go. So I'm just going to press this last seam down on the two ends. And then I'm going to open this right up. I've got some new cameras here that I've been trying to learn how to use, and I think I have spent a long time trying to figure it out, and I think I've got them working. So I sure am hoping. I am a little late on getting out some tutorials, but that's okay. I have had to figure these cameras out. I've had them a while, but for some reason I just today got the hang of it. They were making crazy sounds. I couldn't figure it out. My daughter comes over, and within 1 minute she had it fixed. So, like she said, she thinks it's just she said for her it seems like it's just common sense why it was doing it. But for me, I Googled and Yahooed and YouTubed, and I just could not figure out how to make it stop doing this chirping sound. So after many, many hours today, she had me to fix two things. She told me just to push this one button to make it stop chirping. And she told me, what was the other thing she told me? Oh, and I was getting the lighting all wrong. So within 1 minute, I kid you not, she said, Mom, you just got to open this up and push this button. She said, it's just common sense. And apparently I'm lacking in that department because I have spent so many hours trying to figure it out. The other thing is, my little dogs are outside, and it's beautiful here. I live in Maine. I've already told you that, but it's very warm out today. And they're outside because my new cameras pick up every little sound. So you might hear them at the door. And I told them they have to stay out for a little while. That's okay. They're having fun. But they do just keep coming to the door. And they're out there barking at every single thing they can possibly see. Okay. Here is my quilt top. Let me see. I'm super happy with it. And this is going to go to one of my little granddaughters. The newest baby, Magnolia. She's going to get a new quilt. I'll be back with part 2 of this video. And in that video, what I'm going to do is show you how I'm going to do the backing. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please like and subscribe. I'll see you next time. Remember to keep it simple. Have a nice day. Thanks for watching. Bye.